Hello, welcome to my coronavirus classroom. I'm Janessa Jacobs, and these are the muscles. So, the muscular system. So, here we go. Let's talk about some muscles. Some of my favorite things. I want your body to be your favorite thing by the end of Anatomy and Physiology 2, because it's the reason that you can do anything at all, because you're walking around with one of these things. And the reason you're walking around with one of these things, literally walking, is because of your muscular system. So that's what we're going to talk about today. All of the ways that our muscles work together to give us the various movements that allow our muscles to pull on our bones and propel us through this crazy life we live. So, we look at our muscles in several different ways. We can classify them based on what they're doing for our particular movement. We can classify them based on where we find them, on what they look like. So let's just dive right in. First, by talking about what our muscles are in relationship to their grouping around a particular joint for a movement. So one of the first bones that we met was the humerus. And right, I was right that first day when I said there's nothing funny about the skeletal system. There's not, right? Except that skeletons reproduce by boning. That's kind of funny. So anyway, I digress. Hold on. Okay, so the humerus is the long bone of your arm, right? And the long bones of your forearm are your radius and your ulna. And we have some muscles here that are going to contract, shorten, and pull on the forearm to pull our radius and ulna toward our humerus, right? What muscles would do this? Did you watch your muscle video? The ones that you have to know are the biceps brachii, which was a muscle of the day. So not only does it flex the forearm, it also supinates the forearm and hand, right? Right. The other flexor that's going to help with forearm flexion is brachialis. So the primary forearm flexor is the agonist in the movement, the biceps brachii. Okay? The antagonist is going to be what directly opposes that, or is on the opposite side of the joint and opposes the motion of the agonist. The synergist is going to assist. So you met the synergist for forearm flexion. It's brachialis. And then we're going to have another type of synergist that's going to assist the agonist by stabilizing the joint. So in every movement that we look at, or in every muscle that we're talking about, you have to look at the muscles on both sides of the joint and then decide in this particular movement which muscle is most responsible. So for example, if the movement is forearm flexion, then the agonist is biceps brachii. The synergist would be brachialis, your deltoid's a fixator, and the antagonist is your triceps brachii. Okay? Now what if we look at the opposite movement, forearm extension? Well, now the muscles that are going to pull on my forearm to extend it are what? They would be my extensors. Well, like your triceps brachii, right? So that is going to be my primary forearm extensor. And the antagonist then to forearm extension is now my biceps brachii. So an agonist is the prime mover. And this is, again, for a particular movement. So if the example we're using is forearm flexion, then the prime mover is the biceps, or if we're doing two forearms, are the biceps brachii. Okay, the opposite action on the opposite side of the joint, we have the antagonist, and the opposite action is forearm extension. It opposes, or does the opposite thing. So in this movement, the antagonist, or what's opposing forearm extension, is our antagonist. So this opposes the agonist. And in our example, we could say this would be our triceps brachii. I truly recording? This is the furthest the camera's ever been away from me because of all these plants and things that happened in the reconstruction and design of this living room. And so I feel very far away from you, which is funny because I've been far away from you this whole time. But also I'm like tripping over my mic cord because I've reached its maximum length of 19 feet. It's lovely. Okay, so, sorry, I digress. As always, if I pull the camera over, that's why, because I'm tripping on my cord. Here, there's a solution. Okay, here we go. Synergist is going to assist the agonist. And so in the example here, what you have to know is your brachialis and a fixator. A fixator is an interesting synergist. It's a synergist because it's assisting the agonist, but it's specifically doing it by fixating the joint on one end so that the agonist can do what it needs to do. So we'll just say that for a minute. The fixator is going to stabilize the joint so agonist can do the work. What's an example of this? Do people even arm wrestle anymore? I don't know. It's been a long time since I did anything like arm wrestle. I was gonna say fun, but that's not true. Although fun's a little bit different in the coronavirus classroom. Yeah, you can see red, okay. Do people arm wrestle? You can leave me a discussion post about that. But let's imagine that this is a table and you're, I don't know, down at the local pub and you're having like some arm wrestling competition and you're trying to see who's stronger. The movement that we're doing right here at this, our elbow joint, is forearm flexion, right? So our biceps, we're testing the strength of our forearm flexors, but our biceps, so that's going to be the prime mover. And brachialis is helping and assisting. And deltoid is helping and assisting because it's stabilizing the glenohumeral joint up here while we are doing all of this fighting in forearm flexion down here. So, yeah. Deltoid is a fixator for this movement, so it's going to fixate or stabilize the glenohumeral joint. How far down this board can you see? That was the other issue. Yeah, okay, we got it. All right. People, we are almost to the end of the semester. We've all made it this far. Good for us. Good for us. Okay, movements. Now, my most sincere apologies for the blurriness that might be happening in the background back here. The whole configuration here has changed, and the camera is much further away now. Lucky for you, we only have 2 lectures left to record, and so we'll make it work. So these generalities we're going to say about movements do not apply to the knee and the ankle. And that's because during development, when we were standing up and turning around to walk like this, our joints rotated. So the generalities that I'm going to give you for the muscles on the anterior and posterior side don't work for the knee and ankle, okay? But they work for the rest of your body. And lateral and medial side we're still good on. So let's just imagine for a moment that we're a muscle on the anterior side. Like I'm the anterior fibers of my deltoid, or I'm my biceps brachii or brachialis. What am I doing? What type of movement am I producing when I shorten and contract and pull on a bone? I'm producing flexion, right? So everywhere but the knee and foot, the muscles on the anterior side, when they contract, are going to, as an overall generality, we could say these are going to produce flexion. Okay? Okay. Muscles on the posterior side, then, are going to be those that produce extension. Okay? So look at that. Oh, the muscles on the anterior side, flexion. Muscles on the posterior side, extension. Anterior side, flexion. Posterior side, extension. So muscles on the posterior side produce extension. And then again, we have to like put a little star for these two and say, except the knee and ankle. I am yelling at you, the camera, that's talking to you, as though it's all these feet away, because the camera is. The microphone that is attaching me like a nightmare to this camera right now is right here. So I'm sorry I've been yelling at you this whole time. I'll try to adjust my volume accordingly. Although I probably shouldn't. The smart thing to do would be just as loud so that you don't have to be turning up and down your volume. I'm just gonna be your best nightmare. I am the most beautiful nightmare you ever had. Muscles on the lateral side of the body. Let's imagine this. If I'm a muscle here on the lateral side and I shorten and pull on a bone, what kind of movement do you think I'm gonna produce? Abduction, right? So muscles on the lateral side produce abduction. Well, then hopefully it's pretty obvious that muscles on the medial side produce adduction. Okay, cool. Those are movements. I'm sorry if you hate this lecture. You're supposed to love this lecture, but I'm just getting hot and grumpy. Maybe I'm a little hangry. I don't know. No, I'm just not happy about the cooperative state of things. I just want it all to be easy and not 90 degrees. And not 90 degrees easy and not 90 degrees -y. Here we go. Naming of skeletal muscles. You can learn a lot about a skeletal muscle from its name because we have these really specific rules for how we're naming them. And so fortunately for you, you've learned a lot of muscles of the day already, and so you might already know where these names are coming from. So for example, sternocleidomastoid is not an example of muscle location. That's an example of attachment location. And you could say, well, how is attachment location different than muscle location? It just confused you. And I would say, it didn't really confuse me because look, I caught myself and was like, that was a horrible example because it doesn't work. What does work is your biceps brachii, we've been talking about all day, is found in the brachial region. Biceps, number of origins. I'm just staying here. Biceps, number of origins, and muscle location. Okay, so we can look at triceps brachii, number of origins, muscle location. So let's talk about all these rules. And the first is we can name them based on muscle location. So, well, lady, attachment, that's a location. How is that different? Because this is specifically talking about body regions. So the body region that we find a particular muscle in. So your gluteus maximus that you are probably sitting on right now in your home office is located at the gluteal region. Your biceps brachii and triceps brachii at the brachial region. Your brachioradialis is at the brachial and radial region. So this location is specifically referring to a body region. Okay? We can also name our muscles based on shape. Deltoid is an example of that. As you should know by now, it's one of my favorite muscles, and it looks like the Greek symbol for change, which is delta. And so one could say we all need a little bit of deltoid right now. We all need a little bit of delta. And we all need a little bit of deltoid if we want to do cool things like that, and that, and that, and that. Okay. What else? Trapezius looks like a trapezoid. You've got rhomboideus muscles that look like rhomboids. So here we bring together geometry and anatomy. How many ways can we mix science and math? A lot. Woo! Okay. Muscle size. So if you have muscles that you find in similar body regions or doing similar things, Like your adductors. In lab, you probably learned about adductor longus and magnus flanking gracilis. And adductor is its action. Magnus is the wide one. Longus is the long one. So we can also name them based on muscle size. What are all of the words that we use for that? Longus, brevis, magnus, medius, minimus, maximus. You can write down the whole list in your book. Yeah. Well, no, on your note cards, because with the muscles you need to know. So, all right, so longus is the long one. Brevis is the short one. Magnus is the wide one. If you've got a medius, a maximus, a minimus, medius is weird because it could be between maximus and minimus, but magnus, wide, so it could be in between some other size. Could it? We'll just call it good. Okay. Direction of muscle fibers. So which way are the muscle fibers running? I'm actually going to come back to this one. So circular muscle fibers. If you look at the ways that our muscle fibers are arranged in their fascicles, they can be arranged in a circular fashion, in a parallel fashion, in a convergent fashion where they are all like converging across a wide span, or they could look like a feather. Okay, so circular muscles, that's pretty easy. The fascicles are arranged in a circular fashion. This bad boy right there that helps you purse your lips is orbicularis oris. This that helps you, like with all your stink eye, orbicularis oculi. So circular, if you're looking for how we say that in the name of a muscle, it's orbicularis. Parallel, these muscles are rectus. So you'll see right here, we've got our rectus abdominis. Those muscle fibers are all parallel. Okay, convergent, pectoralis major. So we have a wide origin and we're converging on a narrow insertion. So that's what convergent do. And then pennate. Pennate, in our pennate muscles, this means like feather and they look like a feather, but what's happening in our pennate muscles is that we have our muscle fibers approaching our tendons from various directions. So if you're approaching, specifically various angles. All right, so pennate muscles look like feathers, and the muscle fibers are approaching the tendons in a feather-like pattern. So if we approach our tendon from an angle, if the fibers in the fascicles do, then we're pennate. If we approach from one angle, it's unipennate. If you approach from two angles, it's bipennate. Or if you're awesome like the deltoid, like you approach from many angles, that muscle is multipennate, so just be aware of that. The other way that we can name our skeletal muscles is based on the number of origins they have. So we've already talked about this. Biceps, brachii, biceps, 2 origins found at the brachial region. Triceps brachii, 3 origins found at the brachial region. And we've already talked about this too at the beginning when I was making a fool of myself. I wasn't really making a fool of myself. I was showing you that it's okay to say the wrong thing sometimes, as long as you catch yourself and correct yourself and say, hey, I was wrong. All right, oh, attachment location. This is where are our attachments coming from? So like literally your sternocleidomastoid. The origins are the sternum and the clavicle, and the insertion is your mastoid process. So I'm not gonna write that down. I'm sorry if I seem whiny. I might be a little more whiny in the coronavirus classroom than in a normal classroom for multiple reasons. I'm more uncomfortable. It is so hot. I can feel the sweat dripping down my back, and I'm seeing the value of central air over AC. I mean, that is AC, over swamp coolers at the moment. Although I like having the window open, so I don't know. It's a hot mess. My apologies. We got to work together. We're going to get through the coronavirus classroom. We're going to be flexing, extending, doing all these different things with our muscles. Another way that we can name our muscles is based on what they do. So we said that we grouped all of the muscles back here as the grouped flexors or extensors. These would be the extensors, right? And these are the grouped flexors. So flexor, pollicis longus. That might be, look at that. That's not even one you need to know. But so what? You could know it. You could know a little bit about this muscle without even having to know it, based on what you know. Flexor, what's it going to do? It's going to decrease the angle. Pollicis, what's the pollex? Longus, it's the longest one. So if I've got a muscle in here that's long and helping with flexion of my thumb, then I might be the flexor pollicis longus. I don't know, you can learn a lot from a muscle name is the whole point. So what's it doing? Like our adductors, adductor magnus and adductor longus are adductors. All right, so that's what's pretty cool, is that you can learn a lot by looking at the name. And what's even better is that you have all of these muscles and you can contract them and you can do all of these movements anytime you want to. So because you have voluntary control, this is in theory the only thing that you can do anytime you want to is contract some muscle. So do it. Take a break if you need to. I'm gonna have me some, we'll pretend this is some healthy electrolyte drink, but we'll know it's actually like a straight shot of sugar and caffeine so that I can make it through this lecture this hot. Pause. I know that you know how much I love math and science at the same time, based on the way that I, describe my relationships to physics and chemistry, and I mean, geometry with muscles is kind of cool, but I don't know. I'm never a fan of like calculating things in an A&P class, and a lot of things that can be done when looking at muscles is a bunch of work. You know who likes to do a bunch of work? A lot of people. And when they do it, they're using lever systems. And so physicists, are they probably the scientists who are most interested in lever systems? I mean, we're interested in lever systems, don't get me wrong, because we're using them all over the body to do things. Because lever systems, when we pull on a rigid bar and exert some force so that we can move stuff. So yeah, that's what's happening. As our skeletal muscles pull on our bones, they're creating these systems by which we can get work done. So in these systems, in lever systems, you have a lever, and this is a rigid bar. So in the body, what's the rigid bar? It's the bone, right? Okay, great. And then in the body, then in lever systems, you have some effort. And this is, we could think about as the force applied to do the work. What work? Move the load. So the effort, where is this force coming from in the body? The muscle, right? Right. Okay, and then we've got a load, and this is the work that must be done, or what we have to overcome with our force. So this is the work. So what is that in the body? It's the bone, the muscle, all of the tissues. It's anything that you're asking a muscle to hold on to, plus whatever you're asking it to do. So right now, the load is this skull, and this is the load that I'm giving to the muscles in my upper limb. And it's not just like I can feel many muscles. I feel some activation back here in my triceps. There's definitely some activation in my biceps. So these muscles are all working together to help me bear this load. So yeah, that's that. So for what do we want to say about that? This is the work that must be done, or what we have to overcome with force. Okay? Okay. So in our lever systems, what the players are is we're going to be looking at our what's called a fulcrum the effort and the load. So the fulcrum, the effort, and the load. And so the fulcrum is the pivot point around which we're moving. So in the body, this is the joint. The effort, again, is the work applied by the muscle, and the load is whatever we're asking it to do. So in our body, our muscles and our bones working together are like giving us this relationship of a joint that's pivoting around some fulcrum. And I tell you that because we've got 3 classes of levers, and the way I wrap my head around first class, second class, and third class levers is by looking at the arrangement or the relationship of the fulcrum, effort, and load to each other in each lever system. So we've got a fulcrum, an effort, and a load. And we've got 3 types of lever systems where the relationship of these things to each other in the system is different. And it's going to give us different types of motion, which is going to allow us to do different types of stuff. Furthermore, in lever systems, you can be working at a mechanical advantage and move big heavy loads, or you can be moving at a speed advantage and move smaller loads faster. That's all stuff for some physics class. I mean, if you're gonna be like some musculoskeletal doctor, sure, go through the nitty-gritty details of this and memorize it now, but you'll see it again later. I guarantee you, if it's really important to your career, you will look at the nitty-gritty details of every type of lever that's produced and every type of joint in your body. So I don't want to do that with you right now. Instead, I want you to have a basic understanding of lever systems and how we have them in the body. So in a lever system, the fulcrum is physically in our body will be the joint. What it is this is the pivot point. Okay? And the relationship of the fulcrum to the effort, your muscle, and the load, the work you're asking it to do, is going to change in each class of lever. And the reason I kind of want to just like start here is what helps me, like I just have to come up with easy ways to remember things, like a rule. And if I say, I don't know, I can make a word, flee. Flee, sure, flee. What then is in the middle of a first class lever system is the fulcrum. What then is in the middle of a second class lever system is the load. And what then is in the middle of a third class lever system is the effort. What am I talking about? Let's talk about what I'm talking about. Okay, so an example of like everyday, regular, not A and P example of a first class lever system is a pair of scissors, where the pivot point is the little screw that's holding your scissors together. Okay, so in a first class lever system, the fulcrum is between the effort and the load. Okay, so an everyday example would be scissors. What? That's how I'm spelling scissors right now. I think it is. So which is each part of that? Well, the fulcrum's right here, the screw. Let's say these are the handles, and this is the hair I'm cutting. Where is the effort? Which side, left or right? The effort is right here, right? So here's my effort, here's my fulcrum, here's my load, the weight of the scissors, and then that hair. Okay. An example of that in the body is what happens here at the atlanto-occipital joint. So this is my pivot point, and what I'm doing is I am contracting my muscles and bearing. So I'm pivoting around my neck, and I'm bearing all of the entire weight of my facial bones and muscles and all of that. And the muscles that are doing it are back here pulling. Okay, what muscle does extension in the head? You know this, it was a muscle of the day. Trapezius people. Okay. You might be saying that was not an action I needed to know for trapezius. And honestly, I don't remember all the actions you need to know for trapezius. That is, it assists. That's why I said it. So know what you need to know for trapezius and just be aware that when you are lifting your head from your chest, the muscles in the posterior compartment are the effort. The fulcrum is your atlanto-occipital joint. My muscles hurt so bad here right now. And the load is the weight of all of your head. Right? Like, no, not all of your head. Only the stuff in the front. Okay, beautiful. Okay, second class lever system. The load is in the middle. Well, if my load is in the middle, then that means the work I'm doing is in the middle. That one's a little harder to wrap your head around, but think about a wheelbarrow, and it's got its fulcrum on one end. The load is the wheelbarrow holding all of your rocks or sand or whatever it is you happen to be moving. And then here is your happy little, what muscles did I tell you help to stabilize the arm so that you could move a wheelbarrow? I'm not going to tell you in this video. I'm going to hope you watch your lab video, and maybe it'll be a test question to see if you're watching your videos. It could be worth some extra points. So anyway, you go to stabilize your wheelbarrow, and the effort is here. That's you. Here's all your 6,000 pounds of sand alone. I mean, you did like 16,000 pounds with some help. These 10,000 pounds, you did like 90% of. That's fine. Fulcrum's on one side, effort's on the other side. Now you're getting stronger and stronger muscles every day. It's wonderful. In a third class lever system, what is in the middle is the effort. So the force that you're applying is in the middle of the work that you're doing. So I've got my joint on one side, I've got my load on the other side. A real life example of this is tweezers. Okay, so I was so excited about asking you on the test which muscle helps you stabilize a wheelbarrow that I forgot to give you a real life example of a second class lever in your body. So an example of a second class lever in your body is when you stand on tiptoes. We're going to call that stick figure tiptoes. All right, people, this is take 327 for today. It's not true. It's a slight exaggeration. That's also a slight exaggeration. But here we go. We are almost done. In second class lever systems, our load is in the middle of our effort and our fulcrum. So what does that mean? I've got some work that I've got to do, and I find it between my pivot point and the work that's being done. So a real life example is a wheelbarrow. They're all real life examples because this is really my life and it's a lever. So an everyday example is a wheelbarrow, where our fulcrum is the wheel, the effort is you, and the load is whatever you're toting around in your wheelbarrow. Okay? As a real life A and P example, what is it? It is when we do plantar flexion or stand on tiptoes. So plantar flexion. And how does this work? What's the joint? What's the load? And what's the effort? Well, if you imagine you're standing on tiptoes, let's say that's your toe and that's your foot. Is that your foot? Toe, foot. And it's got a heel that pokes out, and then here's your leg, and then all the rest of you. Just trust me. So this is the joint between your toes and your foot, or it's your metatarsal phalangeal joints. And so there, when you're standing on your toes here, the fulcrum is right there. The load is the weight of all of you that's in the middle there, and the effort is coming from your plantar flexors. What muscles are those? Gastrocnemius and soleus, right? Right. So that's that. Cool. In a third class lever system, our effort is between our fulcrum and our load. So the real life example, everyday example is tweezers. So the effort is you squeezing in on the tweezers. The load is that big old Gandalf eyebrow you got to pull out of your forehead. And the fulcrum is the pivot point on the end of the tweezers. So let's just imagine that. Here's my tweezers, right? There's the fulcrum. I got to squeeze right here to get those tweezers together so that I can grab that hair right there and pluck it out of my forehead. I may or may not have one white eyebrow that comes out of my forehead, which is the example that we have right here. So tweezers are a real life example of a third-class lever system. In your body, the example that's kind of hard for people to wrap their head around, especially after looking at this, is actually forearm flexion. So when you flex your forearm, the fulcrum is right here on one end. What do you think is the load? Oh, this is my fulcrum, effort, load. In my body, this is the fulcrum. What's the load? Whatever I'm holding right here, right? So how is my effort between my fulcrum and my load in this real body example? What muscle is doing this work? It's my biceps brachii, right? Does anybody remember? Has anybody been studying their origins and insertions? I know at least one person has. And so, okay, great. Where does it insert? Radial tuberosity, right? That's where it's inserting. So all of the work that I'm doing is, in fact, between my fulcrum and my load. So, yeah, imagine here I am, and I'm doing some awesome, arm wrestling, and very intense, but I'm strong, so I got this, rah. Okay, so the load is here, the fulcrum is here, and the work that I'm doing is right there between them. Okay, so how you can remember what the first, second, and third class lever is that you can think about what comes in the middle. And we would then, flee the notion of doing some kind of calculation right now in an A&P class. Flee. In the middle of a first class lever system, you find the fulcrum. In the middle of a second class lever system, we find the load. In the middle of a third class lever system, we find the effort. So know that we can find those systems in your body. I would say be able to tell me something about each of those. Give me maybe a relevant example from your studies. Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now you're going to go back through anything from chapter 9 that you missed. You're going to watch that video the lovely lab assistant made for you, and you are going to memorize all of the major skeletal muscles and the actions listed in your lab guide. So here are some tips for learning the muscles. How about, let's think about the information that we can be learning from the muscle's name. If it's the biceps brachii, maybe it's in the brachial region and it might have two heads of origins. Next, you can go to the table in your book and find the muscle on a picture, because that's a lot of what I'm going to be going with. Find it on the figure. Go to the figures on Mastering A&P and see how they match up, or on your website and see how they match up. And make sure you're comfortable with that. Look at the origins and insertions. So if you look at the attachments, the origins and insertions of a muscle can be horribly informative, because an origin is the last movable attachment and it's going to pull on an insertion. So when the muscle shortens and contracts and we pull on the insertion, we will move toward the origin. So if you know where the origins and insertions are, you'll know about the movement, and you can potentially get some bonus points on your really intense practical. So what else can you do? You can relate the location and attachments to its actions, and then holy moly, people, you've got these muscles. Act the movements out on yourself. See if you can feel the muscles contracting under your skin. be totally inspired by these skeletal muscles you have? Like, yeah, for example, the lab assistant left this page here. What muscle do we have that we could look at right here? Brachioradialis. Flexus forearm, supinates forearm and hand. Brachioradialis. Okay, I've got a brachial region. I've got a radial region. Brachioradialis. Flexus forearm, supinates forearm and hand. Oh, okay. All right. Can you see that? Do it. Of course you can see it. And you can do it. So go ahead, rock it out. Enjoy your muscles. See you soon. I know that I keep saying things are my favorite. The muscular system is not my favorite system. The nervous system is my favorite system. Well, it's probably closely tied with the endocrine system for, maybe they're both favorites. You can have two favorites, people. Muscles are not also probably my favorite organs. My favorite organs might be the heart, muscle, and the lungs, but also that's again more than one favorite organ. There could be a really hippy-dippy meditation class coming out of my whole evolution as an anatomy and physiology teacher who's now teaching from home in the coronavirus classroom that's stocked with, not only macrame, that can be used for relevant smooth muscle contraction analogies. You only caught that if you watched the outtakes at the end. Did you know there are outtakes at the end? I know some of you did not know because I know that not everybody watches the videos till the end. How do I know that? YouTube tells me. These are the prayer beads that my macrame plant is now holding. So what's happening is this is becoming a hippy-dippy classroom before your very eyes. And it's beautiful. Still been thinking about that deltoid challenge. If you have been working on exercising your deltoids all summer long because you actually noticed that in a warm-up or in a muscle of the day, you could totally send me a picture of your deltoid. I don't feel like that's inappropriate. Like, this is an A&P class. Did you do the deltoid challenge? What's your deltoid look like? Mine is looking wrinkly and old and I'm not happy about it. I digress. We can try it and we can return it. Okay, here we go. Oh, I'm already recording. Allegedly, last time I was already recording, allegedly, I lost 20 minutes of my life. Today, I'm not gonna lose any. Hello, welcome to my coronavirus classroom.